All right, we are live with V Connecting, setting ourselves up at OLC Innovate with Rolin Moe and Autumn Keynes. We also have virtual participants with us today. So let's do introductions real quick. How about Autumn and Rolin?
Hi, I'm Autumn Keynes from Capital University, and Rolin?
I'm Rolin Moe from Seattle Pacific University.
Great, and let's go with Alan.
I'm Alan Levine from No University.
Great. And George?
Hi, I'm George Station from Cal State Monterey Bay.
Great. And Lisa?
Hi, I'm Lisa Hammersheim, and I'm kind of from Athabasca University, so say that today.
I like the kind of part.
Yeah.
And Maha?
I'm Maha Bali from AUC, American University in Cairo, Egypt.
All right. And Sunday?
Hi, I'm Sunday Richard, and I'm at St. Norbert College in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
All right, great. And I myself am Susan Adams from Oregon Health Science University in Portland, Oregon. And we may have Nadine bumping into us in a couple of minutes. She was coming in and out, so just be aware we might have some other participants that will come online. But without further ado, Roland, tell us what's going on there.
So this is part of the OLC Innovate conference. This is a new conference, a blending of their blended conference and ET4 Online. And so I'm a part of the steering committee, and the term innovation has bothered me for a very long time because it just seems to be this placeholder term we use to denote all the good things. And while there are good things to be considered with that, when it just becomes this omnibenevolence, it becomes worrisome of how we use it and how we engage with it. And so I said, well, let's find a place for criticism of this. And then I thought, well, if we're having a conference on innovation, innovation doesn't necessarily have to mean something new, but it could be a different process, a different product, a different mindset, a different value. There are all sorts of different definitions, which we'll go through as we walk through. But one of the problems of conferences is we get up, we read a paper, we maybe back channel about it, we have a conversation several minutes afterwards, and we move forward. So there's not the opportunity for the sort of interaction that I think a lot of us would hope for in emergent discussions. So we created a museum exhibition on innovation, the history of the term, how the term is used in education, why we use this term rather than some of the other terms that historically have meant the same thing or something very close. And we are then going to kind of put people off into the world to think through it. One of the things that is problematic about innovation is it doesn't have a conceptual space. So we all have a definition of what it means to us, but its history was as a non-concept. So to give a little history lesson, during the British Reformation, innovation was something you called your enemies. So King Charles I was called an innovator by Parliament, and then he called Parliament innovators in return. Well, in the end, he was the one who got his head chopped off. But that was not uncommon in British Reformation England in the 16th and 17th century. Edward VI had a proclamation against those who doth innovate. So in that time, you never see innovation used as a positive term, and it didn't have any great constructive meaning other than change for the wrong reasons. Today, we have it changed for the right reasons, but what are those reasons, and where does that play in, and why have we, over the past 20 years, really fallen in love with innovation, but in education, especially in the last 5 years, with the second wave of dot-coms. So we're going to kind of challenge people to look at innovation in a number of different ways, both as a, not both, but as a product, as a process, as a mindset. And whether you come to it from a critical perspective, what are some of the things that are positive and beneficial about innovation? If you come to it as innovation is the word that you use when you're thinking about change, what are we saying when we use that term?
It reminds me of disruption, like the whole conversation around disruption right now, and whether or not that's a good thing. It's kind of like way back in the day.
No, absolutely.
Innovation was having that problem.
Well, and some of the history of it is Christensen takes, disruption comes from Joseph Schumpeter, who was talking about innovation as destroying and dissolution. So the disruptive innovation is the kind of modern version of how we were looking at capitalism in the early part of the 20th century. So there is quite a bit there, and now disruption and innovation have become conflated or synonymous or whatever you want to say there. So as you can tell, I've spent 6 months doing this, and I can't define innovation. So that's,
Well,
that's the rub of something like this.
yeah, clearly Rolling.
Can I
Yeah.
just that thing about innovation being an insult? In Islam, there's a way of using that term innovation to connote something bad, where you're changing something from its original for no good reason. And I think a lot of innovation in education is a little bit like that. Like you're changing it and calling it innovation, but there's no really good reason why you're doing that. It's not really adding any value. So.
Well, I'm really curious, Roland, to get us into the exhibit itself, because really it sounds like it's about like igniting and inspiring us to be critical, but also I'm thinking about like embodiment, actually, like people are going to physically go through something and have possibly a visceral reaction, and what that might be like for us as virtual participants as you bring the camera through it. Is that the plan today?
Yeah. Are you guys ready to dive in?
Yeah, but Rolin, what about Gordon Lightfoot? What's the factor there?
Right, I saw that today too.
Oh, goodness. So, well, tomorrow I'm giving an Ignite talk that I actually took a Michael McDonald lyric and have built it around that. But I don't know, yesterday my wife, my son, and I were driving. We drove out to the Space Center in Mississippi, which if you come to New Orleans, it's so worth it. It's about an hour down I-10. And I just suddenly, my wife and I were thinking of Gordon Lightfoot singing an album as Gordon Lightfoot, but doing pop hits like Centerfold by the Jay Giles Band or B-52's Love Shack to the tune of Gordon Lightfoot songs. And so I'm just realizing, tomorrow I'm giving this Ignite talk, and today I'm doing this installation, and I can't get out of my head like what song would go best with a record of the Edmund Fitzgerald.
Also, before we jump away and into the exhibition, I want to say we've got a ton of on-site buddies here with us too, which I should have asked to introduce themselves while we were. Say hello, Laura.
Hi. Hi guys, I'm Laura.
Laura.
Hello.
And Patrice is here.
Hi everyone, Patrice Fresco at Cornell University. Good to see all of you guys. So happy that you're participating.
And
she's not in a little box.
Yeah. Not in a little box. She's really here.
Neither is Autumn.
I know, this is the switcheroo.
Okay. So I'm going to switcheroo, and now I'm projecting out this way.
Excellent. So let's start in the main area. I'm on. I actually like curated.
Do you want to be on?
Oh no, that's great. So when people come in, one of the things that we were talking about was what does innovation mean to you is kind of a non-starter as a question, because this is a exhibit about finding a conceptual space, and so that's part of the reason of having the space. And you'll see at the end there's an opportunity for people to be able to commune. There's space for synchronous and asynchronous conversation. But we do want that social aspect that can better happen when people are walking through, but then we're supplementing that with the virtual. So if you want to come over here, we have partnered with a New Zealand app called Story, SDQRY, and they've worked with a number of museums over the last 5 years on being able to provide an addendum to on-site artifacts. So if you can search Defining Innovation on Story. It's stqry.com. You can use the web version or you can do it on a mobile device. Search Defining Innovation and you will find it in New Orleans, and you can go through the exhibit. Not in the same way that it is here, because obviously a digital experience is going to be different than an on-site one. So, but what's nice about that is the people who are here get one experience, the people who are visiting with us virtually get another one, and those who are doing both have this great British mind the gap sort of space that they're able to look at. So when people come in, see the introduction, some questions that folks have to think about with this, because again, we're really trying to think about how does this work in a critical perspective. So what does it mean when we say innovation? So you're looking at S. Craig Watkins, who's an ethnographer out of the University of Texas at Austin. He's working with a group called Doing Innovation, and one of the things they found is innovation hubs, cities like Seattle and San Francisco and Austin, Texas. Despite being innovation hubs, they find greater economic inequality, and despite growth in population, they find a regression of minority populations. So that is one of the unintended consequences of the innovation society that we are purporting. This screen that does not have power yet, but hopefully will by tomorrow, is going to be a quote generator. So if you go to, in the QR codes and you go to the introduction part, there's a place to be able to look at different quotes or definitions of innovation. We have 75 that we found across 500 years. And you can click and have a quote that is given to you. And our hope is that you will take that quote with you and think about what that quote is saying versus what is being said throughout the installation. So how does the quote compare to this, and what are some of the places where the quote pushes back and has difficulty with what we're seeing? For people who are here, this table will have all of that information there. So when they come through, then the next place is the timeline of the history of innovation. Innovation is a term that is 3,000 years old. And so we have a timeline of where it starts with Xenophon in Ways and Means, the Greek text, talking about innovation, which oddly enough, it comes from the Greek word kainatomion, which means new cuttings, but he was using it in reference to taking public slave labor and using it for private gain. So mining was difficult. There was not a lot of money in mining. There was a lot of risk in mining. So there was this concept of new cuttings or creating an opportunity to utilize the public slave trade for private enterprise. So that's the first time innovation was ever used as a use value concept. Before that, Aristophanes used it as a pejorative to talk about somebody offering a sacrifice to the gods for the first time.
Wow, it's so ugly, man.
It's an interesting term. So, like, you know, Plato says innovation's okay, but I'm not really an innovator, and then Aristotle says innovation's not okay, and Plato was an innovator. You know, so the term goes through different places. Plutarch was okay with it, but it never had the positive value that we think about it. So 3,000 years ago, nobody would have ever said innovator mindset, or, you know, 100 quotes about innovation are a positive thing. Now, words change all the time. That's an important thing to think about. So it's not that because innovation has a historically negative connotation that it is a negative thing, but if we just assume that it's good, we might be missing a lot of stuff we're not aware of. So if we continue on, we can look at some of those general things. I did some engrams of how innovation compares to other words. So innovation versus novelty. So innovo, renovo, and novare are the Latin roots of what we think of as innovation today: innovation, novelty, and revolution. So when have those terms been popular throughout history? Now, the New York Times, we can only go back to 1860, and with Google Ngrams, we can only go back to 1600, but you get an idea. So novelty is a rather popular term, and then it kind of is taken over right around 1950, right around when technological innovation comes to the forefront. Because innovation didn't really have that technological connotation until Sputnik. And you could actually kind of see right here is that moment that we launched Sputnik, and then suddenly we're about technological innovation.
That moment right there where they switch.
So, because when Schumpeter's writing about it in 1939, and when Thorstein Veblen and their economists, when they're writing about it, they're thinking about economic innovation. And when we think of Everett Rogers, who's most well known for diffusion of innovation, which is a text that's used in a lot of doctoral programs, he's thinking about it from a sociological perspective. So we have all this different conflation of the term, and what is now today we use it in this very different way from how it's historically been appropriated. So then we want to think about what are the steps in which we get to technological innovation. So we start with political innovation, which is what Plato was talking about, and Xenophon, as I mentioned, Plutarch. And what are the trends through that? And Alan, you're going to notice some of your photographs through here. Thank you very much. And you are properly cited, by the way. So we get that, and then the word really kind of goes away from its political tradition and goes to its religious with the British Reformation in the 15th and 16th century. So, and it keeps that negative perspective.
We had somebody else just
wonderful. Hello. And then it keeps that negative. It keeps that negative perspective as innovation, as Maha was talking about. It is kind of change for change's sake. That we're not doing a change for any positive benefit. We're doing change because we want to be novel and we want newness, and we're getting rid of tradition. That changes because of the French Revolution, and so we go to social innovation at that point, which is tied in revolution. So we have the French Revolution, and in the aftermath of that, the revisionist history that comes out of that in the 19th century subscribes to the French Revolution, kind of this social innovation or this social reform for good. And it's the French socialists who really kind of bring the term from a negative connotation to a positive one, which is somewhat ironic when you think about today who has championed the term innovation. Often you're thinking about kind of Silicon Valley, which is a very libertarian mindset. But the real the reclaiming of the term happened because of socialism. And then we finally get
Rolin?
Yes.
Can I just stop you for a second? Is there a digital version of this thing, like
There
a
is.
timeline?
Yes. So if you go to stqry.com.
Yeah, I'm there. I think.
And then search
I've got that link. Is that like a digital version? It doesn't look like a digital version of what you're doing right now.
It's not exactly the same, yeah. So it's a little bit different. So it'll say defining innovation. I have to change. You'll see an image of an exploding light bulb.
Yeah. I didn't realize that's what it was, but okay.
Go to the stories, Maha.
And so there are several different
Ah,
sections.
got it. Okay.
Right now we're in the history section of that.
Okay, good. So I think we've tweeted. Have we tweeted this out so people can find it? Okay, good. So just follow the stories, because I wasn't seeing that stories tab, and I was trying to figure out what it was. Because a lot of what you're saying, I want to go back and look at. So I'm sure other people who are watching are also thinking the same thing.
And any problems you have, so it actually wasn't supposed to go live till tomorrow, but so you guys are the pilot version. So any problems you have, anything that's not there that I could have forgotten to put some text, please let me know, and I will go back and take care of it. So this will live beyond the conference. So it should be good. Okay, so then we get to technological innovation, which we finally get to. The first time it's used is in 1915, but it doesn't catch on until the 50s and 60s. But again, what we're trying to do in this space is really look at, pushing back on that assumed definition. What are the other places and spaces where things are occurring? Any questions at this point? Because then we're going to get into.
Yeah, we're about halfway through.
About halfway through, yeah.
So this is a great place to kind of break. Are there questions? How are you guys? Do we got?
It's a V connecting bomb.
So do we have questions? Do we have reactions? Did you guys already know about this? What are you guys thinking right now?
I expected like a haunted house with things popping out.
I can do that for you.
Haunted house.
What we'll do is we'll change the bunting and we'll have it come around, and so you're stuck in here forever. So you keep trying to get to the exit, and you keep keeping it ever the fix.
I'm just struck. I mean, so much experience is Rolin there narrating it for us. I mean, you're born to be like a museum guide too. If the ed tech thing doesn't work out.
I really do want to see this on C-SPAN in a few days, though. That's go city to city, and
it's
they
okay to have the little pauses too. I mean, this isn't a show. This is a conversation. But if you guys are ready to move on, we can move on too.
Well, go ahead. Somebody was trying to jump in.
Yeah, George is speaking. Can you hear him?
I cannot hear him.
Oh, okay. Oh, interesting.
What he's saying to us at all?
Uh-oh.
He says this could be on C-SPAN in a couple of days. Let's test George one more time. Let's see if you can hear him.
Hi, testing 1 2.
I do not hear George at all.
Uh-oh.
Wow.
It's funny because the virtual people can hear you, George.
Yeah, you sound fine on our end.
It's funny, now that you mention it, I don't know if we heard him doing it.
No, we didn't.
But I thought that he was having a technical difficulty. I didn't realize you guys actually heard him.
Okay. Actually, there's I've got a question up in the chat, and that's really my question. If Rolin could maybe jump to the disruptive innovation.
I don't think they can see the chat.
Oh,
I'll read it off.
Let me capture it.
That'd be great.
And I'm happy to take. You can interrupt me in the middle. Anything.
Yeah. So Rolin, the question from George is in the chat, and I'm going to read it off to you, which is innovation as use of public slave labor for private gain. How does that transfer, if it does, to the disruptive innovation of the past few years?
Well, I don't think there's a direct relationship between that, but I do think it's a really important point to note that when we use a term that has such a general definition, so if we think about Everett Rogers saying a change of a process either new or new to a population, it's a very general definition. Then we think about George Couros, who just wrote The Innovator's Mindset in 2015, and he says a change that makes something better. That's an even more general definition. So we have this word that, because of the generalness of its use and because of the overwhelmingly positive connotation we see in mass media and from government, so the United States, Britain, Australia, many Western countries have dedicated innovation as part of their goals for the 21st century. I always find it funny that we're still talking about goals for the 21st century in 2016. We should start thinking about goals for the 22nd century if we're going to be forward thinking. But it's important to note that the term doesn't necessarily have that just general utopian positive definition. So I think about, oh, why can't I think of his name right now? He has the great blog. He said tinkering towards utopia.
Oh.
Tech guy. Been around for a long time. I can't think of his name, but he said tinkering towards utopia. And we'll get to a place where we see that
Tom Whitby. Tom Whitby.
Thank you, thank you. But as we are, you know, we seem to be continuing to do this with innovation rather than making the. We're saying we're doing one thing, but it seems like we're doing something else. And so I think that that relationship between how it was first used is important because it shows that this isn't just this bucket term we can use to denote all the good things.
I think we can bring back the innovator as an insult, and they will never know it.
That's right. That's right. You
George Siemens, you were such an innovator.
But you know, and my pushback there is, you know, because I coming from the critical side, I'm very interested in that part. But there is such energy around this. How do we harness that while also being aware of the history and those other processes? So you know, the toothpaste doesn't go back in the tube. So yes, George Siemens, innovator. But you know, we need to in some way be able to, you know, I'm a postmodernist at heart. So how do we recognize the positive and the negative at the same time to be able to go forward? So
So we need an innovative way of doing that.
There you go.
Go, Maha. That's perfect.
And that's the installation. Thank you guys. Thank you, Maha, for closing it up. That was wonderful. You just summed up what I've taken 6 months to try and do. So.
Absolutely. For a reason, right?
Absolutely.
You were doing deconnecting for a reason.
Talk about a dilemma.
We've got a couple more things to look at. Yeah, so we got a couple more stuff.
Okay.
A couple more things to look at.
I know you've got another thing that you've got to get to.
I have another thing at 4:45. So. But one of the things, you know, and I hope that you were willing to check in and look at story. We're going to be on the OLC Innovate hashtag throughout the 3 days. I have a defining innovation Twitter handle that I'm going to use to tweet some stuff so people don't get sick of mine. I was planning on creating a bot, but I've fallen behind. So if it gets really slow, because I am in the exhibitor hall, perhaps I will do that. And then there will be a bot to throw the you know, the FI version of innovation at people. But one of the things, the next place you come into when you come to into the exhibition is, what are the terms that we're not using that we once did to say innovation? So we had 5: action, imitation, invention, revolution, and reformation. And all of those at some point over the past 200, 300 years have been used to say what we now say when we mean innovation. And that's odd because, let's go over to imitation for a second. That's interesting because when you think of imitation, you think, well, that can't be innovation. But Julia Child is a wonderful study of this example because she wasn't the first person to do a television show that was teaching-based. She wasn't the first person to do a cooking show. She wasn't the first person to do a French cooking show. She wasn't the first American to do a French cooking show. She wasn't the first American woman to do a French cooking show. She took all of these things and just did a better job of it. She imitated what had come before her, and she would be the first person to tell you that. And so one of the problems when we think about innovation as this creative aspect is we're ignoring maintenance. We're ignoring the fact that in some cases, maybe it is a good job to have replication. Maybe it is a good job to follow in the footsteps. Imitation hasn't always been you know, pulled fully away from imitation has not been pulled fully away from innovation throughout its history. That's really a kind of new space.
Oh, we've got an echo. Can we ask some folks to mute their microphones?
Yep.
I think there's 2 of Dipali.
Okay.
Thank you.
But the case studies, I tried to choose case studies that maybe didn't necessarily come to mind as a sort of thing. Francis Bacon's an interesting one because if you search like famous innovators, Francis Bacon will come up for the scientific method. And then it's awkward because when he's talking about innovation, what he's talking about is very gradual change because he's writing during the time of the British Reformation, so he can't come out and say innovation's good. So what he says is, well, everything's an innovation, but it's gradual. And it comes at the time and the place that it's supposed to go. It's not these crazy changes that are happening because of novelty. And all of his talking about innovation comes as political innovation, certainly not religious or technological. So for revolution, we looked at some educational policy. So specifically, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965 and the GI Bill were two wonderful examples, the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, because what that did was take existing working towards an existing socioeconomic group and turn it on its head. So instead of higher education being for a specific subset of individuals, the Servicemen's Readjustment Act opened it up for more, and then the Elementary and Secondary Education Act opened it up for even more.
Rolin, can I just ask a question? Because you just said we. Who's we?
Who's we?
When did I say we?
A few minutes ago. Like we chose this case study.
Oh, there's been a whole So if you look on the story page and you scroll down, you'll see there have been 15, 20 people who have helped make this possible. So this has absolutely been a group effort. I mean, just what you see here was really put together in the last 15 minutes by a team of at one point 20 people who came in to help put everything up and get things fixed. It's been a real great team effort to make this happen.
And I think you had a sign of all their names
Yeah.
up at the front, so we can check that again on the way back. I can
Yep.
show that to you guys. I think I might not have done a close-up on that one. So.
And one thing I do want to note is a lot of the research. So the educational aspects of this are pulled from a lot of places, but a lot of the history comes from a French scholar named Benoit Gaudin, who wrote a book about innovation that, of course, I can't think of the title of it right off the top of my head, Debunking Innovation or Contesting Innovation from 2015. And it's the most thorough history of a term I've ever seen in my life. It's just absolutely great. If you care at all about innovation, it's rather expensive. It's a Routledge book, but a lot of the research for the early part of it is on his shoulders. So the we is this is a very collective effort in what has happened here. How are we doing on time?
Yeah, how are we doing on time?
We have a few more minutes.
A few more minutes.
So I want to get to the conclusion aspect because, as I mentioned to Alan, there is the critical part. The pushback against innovation is this encroaching utopia, but there is the aspect of innovation is what we are using to promote social justice in a way. And so sociologists, interestingly enough, in the 50s when innovation gets this technological term, sociologists like Everett Rogers said, wait a second, we've been doing social mobility and social reformation for a long time. We've been doing social innovation. We're going to use innovation as a term, and we're going to define it to be opposed to this technological innovation. So the positive has as much pushback as the negative with the positive. So it's important to think about what are some of the things that we're seeing here, and then how do we push back on those. So when you get to the conclusion, there are two conclusions to look at, and they have different examples of things that today are considered innovations, innovative, innovators, innovativeness, whatever words you want to put with it. And then if you were on site, you would walk into a feedback booth like Antiques Roadshow. This wonderful space here, I want you to close your eyes. I want you to imagine a camera and a set space for somebody to talk and have that music that plays along with it. And then over here we'll have the social media feed, and we'll be popping some questions in, and people can have conversations either with one another or with people who are participating virtually.
Very cool.
So that is the installation. Your very own tour.
Mad genius, Rolin Moe. Mad genius.
Thank you, sir.
Great. Are there any questions? Rolin only has a few more minutes, so I want to give folks a chance to ask some questions or even just reflections.
Yeah, I'm wondering. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'm wondering if Roland's intention of this was of course, to make people think about this term, but at a conference that's called OLC Innovate,
Right.
I mean, this is probably going to be whispered about through the next couple of days, right? So people can't use the word without thinking about it and how am I using this, right? So I think that's pretty genius. I love that. So just wanted to.
Yeah, and you know, that was some of the design here, because if it's all going to be on back channel, you know, conferences kind of have emergent themes and things. I guess we were trying to create what's a space like that going to be. How do we include some of the critical in that? So I think back to the Open Education Conference in November up in Vancouver, and there was very much a side seeing that open was losing or not at the forefront was the kind of cutting edge creation and devotion and almost zealotry that went with the early days of the movement. And on the other side were free textbooks. And both of those are very important things, but there wasn't a space for that wrestling. And so there was a little bit of discord because Thursday was kind of textbook day, and all the sessions were about textbooks. And so Friday kind of became pushback against textbook day. So this was an opportunity to create a space so as those conversations are emerging, there is some boots on the ground for people to go to, for someone to reference back, some sort of foundation.
It's almost like you're institutionalizing the snark. So the snark is actually part of the conference. Like, you can't be snarky about innovation and innovate because the conference is already doing that and embracing it, which is really cool and really Rolin Mo, postmodern everything.
Yeah.
This is what happens when you give Rolin steering committee responsibility.
It is. Yes. I embrace the discord and I embrace disagreement. So here's the opportunity to do that. And because it's not my conference, there it is. It's just out there, you know. So the conference gets to have the disagreement in house. But what a wonderful thing, because if we're going to be, you know, if we are the sort who are going to analyze and overanalyze the overanalysis, and the snark then comes out of that, it's nice to have that rooted in some way so we have a record. Maybe we can learn from it.
Are you going to get like a lot of the vendors to march through there too?
I'm in the vendor hall.
We're in the vendor hall.
I know, but they're stuck in their booths usually. They should experience it.
I'm going to plan on it. I mean, you know, I'm going to be here most of the time, and then Daryl Tate from the Tarrant County College District is going to be joining me. And so, yeah, I plan on getting some of the vendors through. Canvas is our vendor sponsor. So
for
that
the
was
or not
for the installation.
For the
installation.
installation.
So there's a, you know, it's if we want to give them a shout out for their willingness to help sponsor this, because posters are not free. And I think that was a good choice, because I know in the past this conference has sometimes put odd pairings between sponsors and keynotes. So, you know, but again, I think it's
another bomber.
Another bomber.
Yeah, we had Rebecca.
I think it's the fourth, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Laura!
We love it. We want more of it.
Carry on.
And this is? You are?
I'm Laura Pasquini, and I'm thrilled that there's some fine characters here, both online and in person. We can high five and digitally high five.
And in person high five.
Cool. So I'll let you carry on, because you're spouting good things there, Rolin. So keep going.
Laura is the conference chair or something like that.
That's right.
Thank you, Laura.
Just in case people watching don't know that.
Oh, well, fine. Yeah. Well, Laura's the one who's leading the thing I have to go to next. So.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm afraid to call anybody innovative.
I was like, no.
Other questions?
Other questions from virtual?
Trepidations.
Awesome. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you guys for coming.
This is great. I have a quick question for you.
Yes.
How much of your time are you going to spend in here?
Most of it.
Yeah? So when people come here, they're going to be able to see you and talk to
so
you
when people
about this
come
stuff, too.
into this space, it'll be myself and Daryl Tate.
Okay.
And, you know, I mean, yeah, I've dedicated the conference space to being here.
So if you're not giving a lightning talk or doing something
I have a couple
else.
other things that I'm signed up for.
Yeah.
You know, so you guys will have to let me know how the other sessions go. But yeah, so and that goes for being.
Don't worry, we'll bring him food. Okay.
But that goes for being in person as well as face to face or as online. So, you know, as you're going through the story platform and you have questions, I'll tweet out the handle for the innovation installation, and we can have conversations there as well.
Great.
And V Connecting can tweet out the and all of you guys can tweet out this video, because I think that'll be really helpful for anybody who's not here at the conference.
Yeah, I can take care of that. That sounds great.
Awesome, thank you.
So thank you guys so much for joining us.
Great. Well, thank you. I'm really excited. Actually, Rolin, I'm just going to say one last comment. I'm really excited for you to capture those aha moments, especially when there's dissonance happening for a participant and particularly for the vendors. I'm really curious about how that plays out, because that's, there's such a it's a push-pull, and I feel like we need to embrace more of a healthy relationship between institutions and ed tech, and I think this is a real driver and possibility for that. So if we can model that capturing of the dissonance where it becomes an aha moment that's positive and purposeful, I think that could really be a driver for change. Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you for mentioning that. I look forward to being able to have the vendors come through and have a conversation with that. In my day job, I spend a lot of time working with a lot of different people from a lot of different walks, and that's, my lightning talk is ironically first. So they're going to have the person one of the people who's on the critical side of innovation giving the first ignite. But the idea, it's called structural barriers to innovation, and it doesn't do us any good to put everybody in the buckets and the labels. So when I first saw I was in the vendor hall, I thought, is that the right place for this? In the end, it turned out, I think, to be a wonderful opportunity to maybe have some conversations that traditionally don't happen in vendor halls. So.
Great. Excited to see what emerges. Excellent. Any other questions or comments or thoughts?
I think we're going to drop off, but you guys can continue the conversation. Thank you for showing up so that we could do this. Thank you for making your presence felt here at the conference.
Thank you, Autumn. Thank you, Susan. Thank you all.
You're welcome. Take care. Have fun. All right. Do we have folks that want to stay, and do we want to stay live? And
yeah.
No, I'm good for a few minutes, I think.
Yeah, I've already put a lot of time in today.
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing I didn't get to ask, but maybe somebody else knows this, whether the story app thing is going to be available after for an ongoing kind of experience.
Yeah, I think they said it's open.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like it's a thing that's usually done for museums to sort of create augmentations to museum exhibits, which is what he's done.
Yeah.
It's such a great idea, though. Like I'm loving this. I want to do this for my dissertation. I'm like, set this up and
Well, I just realized that speaking of closing loops between these people, like photo bombing or video bombing and everything else, is that one of the people it's Dave Cormier actually, who was huge on trying to cross the boundaries of the different buzzwords. And I don't think he says buzzwords, but I say buzzwords whenever he and I chat about it at all. To try to get like administrators and so on, the terminology they use, like value added, this and that, and and things that we generally don't want to hear. To try to find that common terminology, and I think that what Rolin's doing, the word innovation would be right up his alley. So, maybe I may drop each of them a note just so that they can connect on that.
That's a good point. What Dave Cormier does is that he uses terms that would annoy us in ways that don't annoy us. And so the administrators can listen. I think he does it so administrators can listen, and then he shows them this other way of understanding the term, which is really genius, I think. I don't know how it works for him in practice, but it's one of those, but Dave is saying it, so I'm going to read, and then you discover that actually, I was just thinking that the thing that Dave does and this thing that Rolin does, like if all events or conferences and so on reflected that deeply about the uses of the terms, that would be really interesting.
Yeah, with the crossing of the vendor line that he was talking about, if you will, because we, even, when we're doing different work, or we get a little contract or this or that. We're not really thinking about that, and he's in the exhibit hall for the length of the conference. So, you know, just that in itself is different. It seems to be different. Yeah.
My experience, I think I was at OLC or whatever it was last year, ET4 Online, and there's times in exhibit hall where they're just sitting there totally bored because there's nobody in there, and it's almost kind of sad. You just see them sitting at their desk or, you know, on their device, and at least now they have something to engage in, hopefully.
Yeah.
I mean, is the hope that administrators and vendors would better define it when they use the term? Because I can see, you know, talk being done about it now, and, you know, some people having conversations about it, and the vendors or your administrators might be part of those conversations, but then what happens after? So what would be, is it just better defining it when you're using it?
I think less defining and just seeding. I mean, you know, I've already learned a lot. Like, you know, Rolin's explanation and his whole thing about the origin of the words and these shades of meaning are gonna just filter into, you know, my back channel of my mind. So, you know, when the word comes up, your associations with it start to change.
Start to get
I think it's also inviting us to put intention behind it. What's your intent in using the word? What's the purpose? And explore the possibilities of that being emerging and also being very defined depending on context, and not just throw it out.
And then you start questioning all the words, you know.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, just becoming resensitive to these words that we're all using so freely, but to see that rich history and the backstory that's behind every word, it's really, it's a cool thing. It's gonna mess up everyone's thinking for the week, but, you know, in a good way, for sure.
Great. Well, and also, funnily, this morning, Catherine Cronin was again reminding us that open doesn't necessarily mean good at a conference about OER. And the conference is called OER, but she's challenging OER as open, and that was the keynote speech, right? So I think it's a nice parallel a little bit between the two events happening today.
Great point, Maha.
Yes.
And we get to be in both places at the same time.
Thanks to a small group of innovators. No.
Who do you call an innovator?
Well, you all are intentional innovators. Intentional innovators.
Right. Nice. All right. Well, I'm gonna close up the live portion of this and thank everybody for participating today, and what a wonderful chat. So thanks so much for V Connecting.